What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Librarians of Solana podcast. My name is T, and I am one of the librarians here in Solana in the world of Wraith. This week, we're going to have a rather short episode, but we're just going to detail some of the thoughts that I have about the ban list announcement that came on April 4th/5th, depending on where you are in the world. 4th if you're in the US, 5th if you're in New Zealand. We got the announcement, and the announcement says that there are no changes at this time, but that they are keeping a close eye on the current meta, and that they want to have something fresh for the Pro Tour. So we know that there's going to be a new scheduled announcement for Monday, May 2nd, which is just about 2 weeks before the Pro Tour happens. They also detail in this announcement that they anticipate Bravo, star of the show, to potentially not be a part of that metagame for the Pro Tour. They talk about how he could hit Living Legend, and that they list some of the events that feed into it. So they've changed a lot of the battle hardens to be classic constructed in what looks like an attempt to LL Bravo star before the Pro Tour happens, so that they don't have to ban anything from that deck. But then it says, considering more than just the Living Legend status of Bravo, we will make changes to the banned and restricted list at that time if deemed necessary. To me, this reads like they are going to either hit the deck in one way or another. They've updated the Living Legend page on the website to say that it either bans, or that things go into Living Legend either when a new set releases or upon a banned and restricted announcement if it has hit that point. So it looks like they're trying to force Bravo into Living Legend at this announcement on May 2nd before the Pro Tour, which is it seems like a little bit of a cop-out at first, right? Because you're looking at this announcement and it shows they've changed events around. They're not wanting to ban anything per se, but I actually really like this change. I like the no changes now. We're going to get if they correctly handle the ban announcement on May 2nd, and we get a fresh format going into the Pro Tour, I think that's going to be a good spot for players to discover some newer decks that we haven't seen in a while. We might end up with like some Dash running around, a little bit more Chain, some of those decks like that we haven't seen in a while could make a very strong reappearance into the meta, and I think that'd be really cool. I think that'd be great for viewership on this Pro Tour and for audience participation. It would also help people who are starting to feel less great about the game right now start to get back into the game, I think, because while I do think this is one of the healthiest formats we've had in a while with this triangle meta, I think one big problem that we have is that Bravo is a 50-50 deck, but he has two different builds, so combined he has 100% stranglehold on the meta. Like, the control builds are better against Prism and Viscerai, but like the high roll builds are better against everything else in the meta. You have an angle where you could be taking down the whole meta is the problem. You have like a 50% stranglehold on the meta if you play control, because you're going to hit the other tier decks. And then you have a stranglehold on the rest of the meta if you're playing the casino variant where you pull the lever. And I think that's part of the problem, is that you have this deck that just has the potential to destroy the whole meta. And that leads to some people from the outside not playing it, but just watching, feeling like there's just one deck dominating the game. And it's partially correct. But yeah, there's just all these different ways to build the deck. It would be like if Aggro Vis had a great matchup against 50% of the meta, and then OTK Vis had a great matchup against the other 50%, which is kind of where we are, but those lists are just shifting towards more mid-range so that you can just pick your plan and sideboard accordingly. The difference about the Bravo deck is that you have to construct your deck completely different based on which variant you're playing, because the high roll casino version just has like infinite elemental cards, and then the control one is like 60% element and 40% just cards that block well and cards that hit hard. So they're different variations. It's not often that I record a podcast the morning that I want to put it live. So right now I'm recording this. It's 2 a.m. on Thursday. At 4:30, I have a flight to catch out to Dallas for the SCG Con happening there this weekend. So if you see this before that event happens, come by the Star City Games booth and say hello. I'd love to see you there. I love meeting new people at the events and people that I've not encountered much in person before. So if you're there, come say hi. I'd love to hear from you. And then let me know what you think of the podcast. I've really enjoyed creating this content so far, and I'm happy to keep doing it. It seems like there's been a pretty good community outreach, so I am looking into putting the podcast on other platforms as well, such as Spotify and Podbean. That way we can expand the growth of the podcast. So definitely looking forward to the future there. For this last little bit of the episode today, I just want to talk about some of the things that I think could happen for the May 2nd ban and restricted announcement. And then cards will appear on the side of the screen. It's why I opted for this border today with the giant bubble to show cards. So some of the things that I think could happen. If Bravo does not hit Living Legend, I think our ban list looks a little bit like this. You have to hit something from all of the top 3 decks. If you just hit Bravo, Viserai becomes a clear winner. If you hit Bravo and Viserai, Prism becomes a clear winner. I think that a world where Bravo does not hit Living Legend and something needs to get hit from all 3 decks, I don't think you want to cripple them. I think you just want to remove some of the consistency from those decks. And so I think that would look like Bravo, Star of the Show, losing Winter's Wail, Prism losing Arclight Sentinel, and Viserai losing Rattlebones. Let me explain some of these a little bit more in depth, so we'll pull each of these cards up. Arclight Sentinel from Prism. I think the reason for this one is because this gives you some consistency against matchups where you have to go Fatigue and aggro decks. If you can open up Prism to being a little bit more vulnerable to aggro decks, then the deck becomes a lot less scary in the overall metagame. Think about something like your Chain matchup. Prism wants to go Fatigue in this matchup and take out a lot of their auras, but the 2 that they leave in are Parable of Humility and Arclight Sentinel. This is because they have the best advantage against decks where they want to block all out and prevent the most damage. If you can alleviate some of that, Chain would have a pretty good matchup into Prism, and other aggro decks would not have to concern themselves so much about popping specific auras, such as Dash not having to have a high octane turn or use their Achilles accelerators in order to continue a turn after an Arclight Sentinel. So if you can open up some of those aggro decks to be less likely to be fatigued, I think Prism takes a notch down in the meta, still keeping a top spot, but not necessarily in tier 1. And I think that's a good place for Prism afterwards. With Viserai, the removal of Rattlebones gives you a little bit less inevitability. Rattlebones, of course, being a very strong pairing with just generic attacks and being able to reanimate things like Swarming Gloomveil, or a 1 of Ninth Blade of the Blood Oath from your graveyard in order to come in for a big swing. If you hit Rattlebones, you lose the inevitability of being able to always hit an attack off of a Become the Arknight, no matter what you have in hand. Because if you have a non-attack, you can go and get an attack, and if you have an attack that you can't play, you can go get a Rattlebones and potentially play that. So for example, if you had like an awkward hand that you could fix with Skelta, Rattlebones is a good way to do that. One big reason for Rattlebones being my selection of hit is that it helps with the power level of the deck in making it consistently be able to reanimate these cards that you've blocked with early and hit some extra damage. Just Rattlebones off of just paying 2 or off of a Spellbound Creepers is very powerful. You also have that line of text that if you've dealt Arcane, you can do it as an instant. So by removing some of these avenues for Viserai to not get 3 to 4 action points in a turn, you can take away some of the most powerful turns in Viserai. And I think that's a good way to help open control back up into the meta, being able to block out decks like Viserai more, which would help lead to a healthier meta game if we had something like Chain, Dash, Oldham running around, right? So that is my piece that I would elect for a ban from Viserai. Finally, the most interesting one, the one that I get the most hate for having this opinion, is a ban of Winter's Wail. This is an uncommon opinion, but I think that there's a very good reason for this. Winter's Wail is clearly the only weapon that you would play in Bravo Star of the Show. You're not going to play Titan's Fist, and you're not going to play a Nothos. Titan's Fist, just not as powerful of a one-handed weapon when you have Winter's Wail available. Winter's Wail also teams up very well with the Bravo Star of the Show ability, being able to reveal, pitch lightning, attack with earth, pitch ice, attack with hammer. So you get this tempo in threatening a lot of damage and being able to obstruct their game plan. Anothos, the problem being that it's a two-handed weapon, so you can't run a shield with it, and that gives you a big downside on playing Bravo Star of the Show, not being able to have that shield, because Stalagmite has been very impactful in the late metagame, and Rampart was very impactful in the early part of the metagame, with being able to use Crown of Seeds and shield to disrupt them and block a lot of damage. Winter's Wail is a big disruptor. The biggest problem with Bravo Star is once you attack with that big Bravo Star attack, that's not it. You come in with this big attack that's dominated and has a relevant on-hit, so they have to blow most of their resources in order to block that out so that they don't get the bad stuff. And then they're also being followed up with potentially a hammer that will disrupt their turn. So, for example, in Prism, if you block out all of an Oaken Old, for example, and you're finally there, you got your 9 or 11 dominate, and you blocked it all out with spectral shields and soul shields and unmovables and everything, and you keep a blue aura in your hand, and you're like, okay, I can still progress the game by just playing this blue aura and keeping a little bit of tempo. Well, the problem is, if they have the hammer swing, you don't even get to do that, because they're going to give you a frostbite unless you're able to block that all out, so you're forced to arsenal this blue aura, which is quite awkward in your arsenal, or just block for 2 and take 2, and have no hand, no arsenal going into your next turn. If you eliminate Winter's Wail from the metagame, you kind of get rid of some of that disruption, which is the most powerful part about Bravo Star of the Show, coming in for so much damage. Think about it this way. If you fuse an Oakenold and go off of Bravo Star, that can happen 3 times a game. That's 11 damage, plus 4 from your hammer, potentially. With this, you're coming in for a total of 15. That's not all too different than if your opponent attacked with 2 Heralds for 7, or if your Viserai opponent played a Revel in Runeblood to come in for a lot of damage. Remember, we're comparing 3 ofs, so talking about this Revel in Runeblood is not all that far-fetched for trying to compare numbers of damage that Viserai can come in with. If you look at these numbers, they're pretty reasonable. Considering the current meta, if you look at like a dash deck, they could come in with a lot of boost attacks and come in for 15 pretty easily. The problem is that Bravo can do this in a control deck, and on the end of that damage, you also come in with a bit of disruption. If this was a Titan's Fist, you wouldn't necessarily even be attacking for 4, in addition to not applying the Frostbite on hit. Because of this, I think Winter's Wail is a good candidate for a ban from Bravo Star of the Show if he does not reach Living Legend for this May 2nd announcement. Do you have any questions? Comments? What are your thoughts on the ban list? Are you happy with the way that they've put this through? What would you change if you were going to change anything on May 2nd? And don't say just ban Bravo. That might happen, but I think we'll just wait for him to be Living Legended out. Anyways, I'm going to get going because I've got a plane to catch. Once again, if you're in Dallas, come see me. I'd love to see you there. Checking out? Excellent. That's going to be due back next Thursday. I'll see you there.